In 2025, the Trump administration launches a sweeping trade offensive, imposing aggressive tariffs that shake the global economy. These tariffs target not just China, Mexico, and Canada, but also South Korea, a key ally and economic partner, putting decades of cooperation at risk. The administration's hardline view trade deficits equal American loss, so tariffs as high as 25% are slapped on everything from cars to electronics. And now, even foreign films and TV. This marks a new phase. The trade war is no longer just about factories, but culture too. For export-driven economies like South Korea, this is an existential threat. The stated goal is to protect U.S. jobs and force companies to bring production home, but the sudden policy shifts leave multinational corporations scrambling. Global supply chains, built over decades, are thrown into chaos as companies face costly, uncertain decisions. The 2025 trade offensive isn't just about taxes. It's a direct challenge to the global economic order, with consequences only beginning to unfold. For South Korean companies, these U.S. tariffs are a seismic shock. Firms must choose, absorb massive new costs, or relocate production. Both options threaten billions in investment and thousands of jobs. Automakers with factories in Mexico now face 25% tariffs on every car sent to the U.S. Electronics firms face the same dilemma. The logic of regional supply chains, built on NAFTA and USMCA, is upended overnight. The pain deepens as the U.S. revokes exemptions for Korean chip makers, forcing them to get licenses for every shipment to China. This move, meant to curb China, strangles Korean firms that make much of the world's memory chips in China, pushing them to exit the market at great cost. Korean companies are squeezed from all sides: tariffs on finished goods, restrictions on critical components, and manufacturing hubs turning into liabilities. The result: a constant state of crisis management, as the stability that once fueled Korea's global expansion evaporates. Boardrooms are forced to rethink where to invest, where to produce, and how to survive in a fragmented, hostile trading system. The long-term certainty that underpinned Korea's rise is gone, replaced by volatility and risk. The fallout is immediate for Korea's biggest companies. Hyundai, with a major Kia plant in Mexico, faces steep tariffs, and is now ramping up U.S. production in Georgia, while diverting Mexican-made cars elsewhere. Samsung and LG, with large Mexican operations, are considering moving appliance assembly to U.S. plants in South Carolina and Tennessee. These moves are costly and disruptive, but necessary to avoid tariffs. Parts suppliers and battery makers, with billions invested in Mexico and Canada, face even tougher choices. Relocation is slow and expensive. Some, like LG Innotek, may gamble on staying in Mexico, hoping lower labor costs offset tariffs. The result: fractured supply chains, with different divisions pulling in opposite directions. Companies are no longer optimizing for efficiency, but for political survival. Boardrooms in Seoul are redrawing global maps, not for growth, but to manage risk and uncertainty. The era of seamless globalization is over. Now, it's about corporate survival. Tensions explode in September 2025, when U.S. agents raid a Hyundai LG battery plant under construction in Georgia. Over 300 South Korean engineers are detained, sending shockwaves through Korea's business and political circles. Officially, it's about immigration violations, but the scale and timing are seen as a warning shot from Washington. President Trump defends the raid, then bizarrely suggests the detained workers should stay to train Americans, a proposal Seoul quickly rejects. The incident exposes a critical flaw. The U.S. lacks a visa for the skilled technicians needed to launch advanced factories. What was meant to be a symbol of U.S.-Korea cooperation becomes a source of mistrust. The fallout is swift. President Lee Jae-myung warns Korean firms may rethink U.S. investments. Hyundai's planned $26 billion investment is suddenly in jeopardy. The raid creates a perception of the U.S. as a risky, even hostile place for foreign investors. Korean companies now weigh market access against the risk of disruption and detention. The Georgia raid becomes a symbol of the widening rift between two longtime allies. Investment plans freeze as trust evaporates. The trade war takes a shocking turn. Washington proposes a 100% tariff on all foreign-made films and TV. For Korea's booming content industry, this is a direct hit. The Korean wave, dramas, films, and music, has become a global phenomenon, much of it distributed via US streaming giants. Doubling the cost would cripple exports, halt new projects, and threaten thousands of creative jobs. The move is seen as a cultural barrier, not just an economic one, and likely violates WTO rules. It pits the America First agenda against the tastes of millions of US viewers. Korean creators and American audiences both lose, fewer shows, higher prices, and a blow to cross-cultural exchange. The cultural front of the trade war is now open, and the stakes are more than just economic. The economic toll is staggering. Analysts warn the conflict could cost Korea up to $600 billion. The biggest blow, a US demand for a $350 billion investment fund, nearly all of Korea's foreign reserves, risking financial crisis. President Lee warns that without a currency swap deal, this could trigger a repeat of the 1997 Asian financial meltdown. The demand feels more like an ultimatum than a negotiation. Tariffs on cars and electronics, forced exits from China, and a collapsing content industry add tens of billions more in losses. The Georgia raid and hostile climate have already frozen Hyundai's $26 billion US investment. If other firms follow, the losses will only grow. Both countries lose jobs, growth, and trust. The $600 billion figure isn't just a number. It's lost opportunities, canceled projects, and a partnership unraveling. The cost of conflict is real and rising. The economic clash is matched by diplomatic deadlock. President Lee Jae-myung skips a Trump-hosted banquet in New York. A quiet but clear protest. In a tense meeting, Lee insists any investment must serve both nations and demands a currency swap to protect Korea from crisis. The US refuses, sticking to demands for cash and concessions, offering little in return. The proposal for detained Korean workers to stay and train Americans is seen as tone-deaf in Seoul. The $350 billion fund is presented as non-negotiable, deepening the impasse. Meanwhile, Trump prepares for a high-stakes summit with China's Xi Jinping in Korea, using pressure on Seoul as leverage. The risk: alienating a key ally at a critical moment in the US-China rivalry. The deadlock isn't just about trade, it's about power, trust, and Korea's place in a shifting world order. As talks stall, the rift between Washington and Seoul widens. The real victims of this trade war aren't politicians or CEOs, they're workers and consumers. In the US, Korean investment once promised thousands of new jobs. Now, those hopes are on hold. In Korea, export slowdowns and factory relocations threaten manufacturing jobs and the livelihoods of creative professionals. American consumers face higher prices and fewer choices, from cars to streaming content. Korean households feel the anxiety as industries come under siege. The ripple effects are everywhere: lost jobs, canceled projects, and shrinking opportunities. In a global economy, there are no easy wins in a trade war, only shared losses. As allies drift apart, it's ordinary people who pay the price.